Some of y'all look real good today. Praise the Lord. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. When I finished last week, if you've been here the last couple of weeks, I'm doing a series right now called Poverty and Prosperity. It's not called posterity, like my slide said last week. It's prosperity. And I finished last week's message talking about the affluence that we live in America. And I want to revisit that briefly before I continue on today. And it's interesting to me, the song selection and what we sang. Predominantly what we sang about this morning was praise, right? And that goes exactly with what I'm starting with. Because we fail to recognize and appreciate that we live in affluence. And that has given rise to a much deeper problem. And the real problem is thanklessness. There is a prevailing thanklessness in the Church of Jesus Christ. And people say, I don't know about that. I'm a thankful person. I give thanks. I praise the Lord. Well, let me tell you how thanklessness works in the church. This is how thanklessness works. Hey, did you see that? Honey, did you see what the price of gas is now? How on earth are we supposed to be paying for that much for gas? What is wrong with our country? Did you see how much groceries have gone up? Beef is over $10 a pound right now. Man, what is wrong with my company? Can you believe they only gave us a 3% raise? Inflation's at 7%. And all we got was 3%. How am I supposed to live paycheck to paycheck on 3%? That's how thanklessness works in the church. We talk like the world talks. I'm guilty of it too. But it's the speech of our mouth. What does the Bible say about the words of our mouth? Out of the abundance of what? The heart, the mouth speaks. And so when we're talking, we reveal, the words of our mouth reveal that we are living in the framework and the posture and the mindset of the world, which is always talking about their difficulties financially. Because everything is self-focused. Everything becomes about me. It's hard for me. Woe is me. My workplace, the government, my boss, somebody's always messing it up for me. Brothers and sisters, when we talk like the world talks, we move outside of the context for praise and thanksgiving for what we have. Because we live in amazing affluence in this country. We really do. We really do. Thankfulness needs to so possess our minds that we live out a different than the world perspective. We have to live out a different than the world perspective. Now the question is why? The answer is Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1 says, the product of thanklessness is perversion and moral corruption. I'm sorry, I started too heavy this morning, didn't I? Can't wait to have that ham dinner in an hour. Praise God. I was going to give you a synopsis of Romans 1, but I think it's better if we read it. This is what it says beginning in verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men. Tell me if this does not encapsulate what is happening in the United States right now. Who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. Samantha was talking about the rocks crying out. And it came to me about the trees crying out. And I thought, how do the trees cry out? And the Lord said to me, when they do what I've created them to do. When they are who I've made them to be. Being understood by the things that are made. Even his eternal power and Godhead. So that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise. Isn't that the cry right now? We know better than all of you. We're more enlightened. We're farther ahead. You need to catch up with us. We're progressive. We're woke. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanness in the lusts of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies among themselves, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie, and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust for one another, men with men, committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error which was due. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge. Don't want none of that. God gave them over to a debased mind, to those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who knowing the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. Romans 1 essentially says this: they did not worship God as creator, and they were unthankful. Unthankful for what they have, unthankful for who he made them to be, unthankful for even their lives. Therefore, as a result, as creatures, they became perverted, and God gave them up. The King James Version says he gave them a reprobate mind. Reprobate means something that does not stand the test, not approved, that which does not prove itself as it should, rejected, worthless, socially and morally. That's what reprobate means. Here's the principle. Creator and creature in relationship. Creature does not want anything to do with creator. does not want God's input in their lives, is not interested in God's viewpoint, is not concerned with what God calls right and wrong, and is further not thankful for what they have received from Creator, becomes perverted, and is then surrendered to their own devices. Now let's take another perspective of that as it relates to abundance. Let's say the relationship here is provider and creature. And creature does not want to submit to provider's counsel on material wealth, and further is thankless towards the provider for what he does have materially. Creature becomes perverted, and he's given over to his own devices, constantly eaten up with thinking about provision and possession instead of being thankful. And finally, God gets to the point where he says, you want it that way? You can have it that way. Burger King was not the original person who thought up that slogan. You know what Burger King's slogan is, don't you? You can have it your way. It's inspired. In other words, when you choose to quit thanking God for who he is, whether it's as creator or as our healer or as our provider, whatever it is, as our resource, you end up reaping the bitter harvest of a wrong stance towards the very source of our being. And then you're left with nowhere to go. Where do you go? And who do you turn to when God gives you up? I prayed for a wealthy man once upon a time to be saved, especially from his greed, but to acknowledge God. And after a few years of praying, the Lord said to me, don't bring his name up to me anymore. I don't want to hear it. And I thought, oh God, he's damned. And I said, why would you say that to me? And he said, because I've given him opportunity after opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, and he persists in evil. Let him have it. Don't bring his name to me anymore. The United States of America today is in the economic condition that it is in, with the horrible amounts of our national debt and our payments to foreign governments and the proportionate inflation that our economy is breeding right now today because of the worthlessness of our dollar on the world market. It's in the condition it is today because of a prevailing spirit of thanklessness and praiselessness in this country. And the reason there is a spirit of thanklessness and praiselessness in the land is because it is pervasive in the church. And when the church loses its salt, it loses the ability to preserve the culture against the decay. And I believe if the church will take a stand in the area of economic resources and will begin to praise God and say, Lord, all I know is that everything I have is from you. You've given me a treasure beyond all worth, not just Jesus in my life, but a treasure of potential resource and abundance that not only do I have now, but that you would open up to me if I would learn to honor you with it first, and I praise you for it first, and I choose to stop being a poor mouther. I choose to cease to be intimidated by the fact that the news tells me that inflation has gone up this many percentage points, because I understand what you say in your word in Isaiah 48, that you will cause me to ascend. And that you will cause me to ascend in spite of inflation, which means no matter how high inflation goes, Lord, you know, and you will keep me above the crest of it. Because he causes us to profit. He says, I will cause you not just so you can survive in the midst of inflation, but you will become instruments of deliverance to people who don't know a way out of their financial dilemmas. And the point of coming to praise and thankfulness in our lives is just the beginning. Because when we do it individually, corporately, we will recover our saltiness. And once there's salt in the church, we can be a preservative element in society who's in the midst of decay. If this nation doesn't turn from thanklessness, God is going to give her up. And the day that that happens, the day God gives this country up, I will tell you what you will read in the headlines. You will read that the American dollar is worth nothing, and you may as well burn your money and everything else you have to keep warm, because it won't be worth anything. And people say, well, is that going to happen? Are you forecasting economic doom? Maybe this is some sort of ploy to get us to give all our money to the church before it's worth nothing. No, it's none of that. It's none of that. I believe that it is the role of the church to turn around the condition that the country is facing. If the church becomes economically responsible, that is, if the church becomes praising, first for the affluence it enjoys, and then responsible in its distribution of resources, then it can begin to use powerful intercessory prayer to see the turnabout of the force of unrighteousness. And instead of men ruling this nation unto its destruction, there will come a righteousness which exalts the nation. And where sin has been a reproach in this land, there comes a deliverance of God in the land economically as well as in other areas. Yes. Hallelujah. I've said this before. Sodom and Gomorrah were not destroyed because of sexual perversion and sin. They were not destroyed for sexual perversion and sin. They were destroyed because no righteous were found there. Genesis 18:32, Lord, if there be but 10, would you spare the city? I will spare it for the sake of 10. So it's not that I believe in hope. It's not ethereal optimism. It's that I believe in the eternal Word of God and the promises that He makes in it to us, His body. Amen? Amen. Okay. Dead rabbit. Now I'm actually going to get to what I'm talking about today. I was going to read to you the parable of Luke 12, but I'm not going to get to it again, so I'm not going to read it to you again. But I do want to bring you to verse 15. And he said to them, take heed and beware of covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. Covetousness is the point of my focus today. Take heed and be aware of being a covetous or a coveting person. Covet. What does that mean? The essence of covetousness is the preoccupation with having. The preoccupation with having. I've got to have. In order to have, I've got to get. Once I get, I got to be sure that I keep it. Covetousness, the key words are have and get and keep. And here's the interesting thing. A covetous person would not generally think of themselves as covetous. I think it's very easy for us to come to the scriptures and read them and see someone else in them. We all face the difficulty of getting a perspective on ourselves and seeing our own reflection in the mirrored pages of the Bible. I knew that point wouldn't go over well. Let me talk about covetousness for a minute in a way that I think will help us all see what it is really. All of us are thwarted at some point by the idea that we are afraid that we will not have enough. We say to ourselves, I've got to somehow take care of being sure that I'm going to have it. What is the it? The it is something that secures my identity or my future. There are people that if you took a cigarette out of their hands, you would destroy their self-image. There are people that if you shaved their head or if they went bald, they would be absolutely devastated. I would not be one of those people, just for the record. There are people who, that if you disallowed them the clothes that they wear, or the fashion that they follow, or the house that they have, or the style of car that they drive, the style of car that they have, that you would damage their image because their identity is wrapped up in what they have. I've got to have that. Don't take that. Don't take that. Leave that. I've got to have these things. And the problem with that is that it not only distorts our identity, but it ruins and it obstructs any chance of us being a channel of the real life of abundance that the Lord wants to flow through each and every one of us. But when it comes to the realm of possessions, in terms of material things, money, and needless to say, all the things that money can buy, those things that we get to secure our identity, or sometimes we hang on to money because it's reserved and we hold it as a place of securing for ourselves for the future. The problem of ever making money an instrument of either identity or security is you will never get enough of it. You will never get enough of it. People who use money or material things as an instrument of securing their identity are only testifying to the intensity of the poverty mindedness that affects us all. We're all affected by it. Let me help you understand a little bit about covetousness so we don't limit ourselves from seeing it, because it affects all of us in the financial area of life. All of us. But it affects us in other parts of our lives too. I want to tell you how I've been aware of covetousness in my own life in an area other than money, and I didn't like it. There have been times, more than one, where I've been in situations where I'm being introduced to someone new. Maybe even important people or famous people. And instead of just introducing myself, I add in a little bit about who I am or what I do. And it's subtle. And maybe the people I'm saying it to don't even realize what I'm saying. But there's times when I've recognized that the reason I've introduced myself that way is because in some small sense, I've coveted being recognized. As if in some way that recognition from other people could secure something about me or for my future. That's how covetousness has reared its ugly head in my life at times. And when it does, and I'm aware of it, I'm immediately presented with an option. I can ignore the red flag that's going off in my spirit. I can tell myself, come on, you're just being ridiculous. Just, it's no big deal. Or I can recognize that thing for the serpent that it is and put my heel to its head. And when I do that, the latter, the Lord by His grace takes care of it. But I want to ask you, what becomes yours? What do you covet? And the overarching point I want to make to you now is that you need to be able to recognize the temptation of covetousness in other areas of your life. Because if you can see it at work in other parts of your life, you'll have no problem seeing it when it pertains to money and your possessions. A lot of us would say, well, I don't have all that much money. Well, let me tell you something. However much you have enough to be covetous over. Because coveting and possessiveness does not have anything to do with an amount. It has to do with getting and keeping and having. It would be like if I was in graduate school and I was writing a paper on some particular topic and I came across a source that was amazing and would really prosper the product of my work. And I'm talking to another classmate about it and they say, well, I'm writing on that same topic. I mean, what's the source? And I go, no, I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. I can't tell you that. And they say, well, why? And the justification I come up in the moment is, well, then the professor would think that we cheated. So you have to go find your own source. But in reality, that's not the reason I'm saying that. I'm saying that because I've got one up on them. And so I need to get and keep and have what they don't. Does that make sense? What about pastors that don't share insights? They wait until they can use it in a message so they can get credit for it. So they don't reveal the revelation they've received because it's theirs. Listen, feel free to use anything that I say. All I ask is that you say it true to the Word of God. Is that all right? The reason I can say that freely is I'm not dependent on what He's given me yesterday. I'm dependent on what He gives me now. And since He's the Creator, you're never lacking a resource. He makes it up. He is the Creator. He just speaks it into being and boom, it exists. So the whole subject of resourcefulness in our lives is us determining, are we going to live out of our relationship with the Creator in His resources, or are we going to try and do things in terms of our own resources? And even in the area of creativity, you may be very creative, but I would submit to you that you are not as creative as He is. I think that's a safe assumption. Ladies, what about our recipes? Girl, how'd you make that dessert? That was wonderful. What is in it? No, I can't tell you that. That's a secret. I was reading recently about a pastor who's also a songwriter, and he told this story of how he writes music. He said, I get down in the morning to worship the Lord, and at times a song will just come up. And I'll begin to worship the Lord with it, and I just start singing, and then, sometimes there's something to it. And I find that not only is it just a spontaneous song, but it has some sort of form to it that is not a song in the Spirit, but is something that is organized, something that I could put together that people could sing. And he said, I used to find myself a lot of times I'd get up from the couch where I was kneeling and I'd go over to the piano and I'd begin to write down the song. In my thinking, it would be, I have to write this down while it's hot. While I have it. And then a lot of times he would stop and go back to prayer, but there were other times that he would not, because he was trying to look for the right chord or look for the right way to transition between verse and chorus. And before he knew it, he'd be working on the song and would have totally forgot about the one who gave him the song. And he said, I would feel bad when I would recognize it, but I would justify it, and I would say, this is about the Lord. And if I write this, people will be able to sing it and worship Him with it. And he said, one time I was kneeling and I started to get up. I had a song. It was beautiful. I could hear the chords clearly in my mind. It was definitely something that could be written for the church. I was singing the melody, and the words were good, and they had that quality to them that I knew it was a song, and I started to get up, and the Lord said, don't do that. Don't do that. If you do that, I'm going to stop giving you songs to worship me with, because every time I do, you get up and you leave me to go write it down. But if you will stay with me, if you will worship me, then the songs that I give you, whenever I want one of those to be an instrument for my church, then I will keep it on your mind and I'll bring it to you in your remembrance at a time when you can write it down. But don't you leave me spending time with me to go write down a song. And besides, there's way more where that came from. Now that has to do with songs, but how many of us can think in that same context about other parts of our life where that principle applies? That's what covetousness is. Being afraid that there won't be enough. I've got to get what I've got now, or I won't have enough. And we lose the marvelous creative possibilities of God birthing in us more and more and more. And it comes right on down through every area of our lives, right into the realm of finance and possessions, and nothing touches a nerve in us more than the fear of not having enough. Lord, if I release this money, if I do what you're asking me to do, is there going to be enough for the next thing? Or where's the next going to come from? Will we be enough? Will we know enough? We've got to plan. We've got to be careful. We've got to keep. Especially when it's something we've accumulated. Let me hang on to that. Some people in this room would say if they had $100 in the bank, that would be just great. It'd be great just to have $100 that doesn't have to be spent on something right now. And there's people, for them it would be $1,000. $100 wouldn't mean that much, but $1,000, they'd say, honey, if we just had $1,000, we'd have this hedge against the rainy day. And then there's people that wouldn't mean anything to, because they would need $10,000. Not because they're selfish or not, but just because that's where their life is. That it would take $10,000 for them to feel secure in any given moment. And then there's people that it would take $100,000. And there's people whose obligations and commitments and requirements of their life, it would take $1 million. And then there's people that it would take $10 million. And we say, man, that's ridiculous. $10 million? I'll never be worried about a thing. Right? Isn't that what we say? But it's not ridiculous. The 10 million or the 100, it's not ridiculous. Because we somehow feel that by accumulation, we're going to be able to secure ourselves. And I know some men that even with 10 million or more, they would not feel secure. And the fact is, if you're trying to secure yourself, you're never going to have enough. All right, worship team, you can come up. Somebody say, praise God. He's almost done. Now, I do have to say, the Bible has so many, many things to say about this topic. And I could spend the rest of the year trying to unpack what it has to say. But there's a balance to what I'm saying. And if you don't bother to study it out on your own, then you run the real risk of going away under a misconception about the things I'm saying. But I am trying to shotgun you, as it were, with the double-barreled truth. And I presume that you will be serious enough to get after it. 1 Corinthians 6 says that the greedy, the covetousness, will not inherit the kingdom of God. It's listed right there between thieves and liars. And now I'm not trying to say that everybody has to sell everything or that God says you can't have anything. But what he does say is, I don't want you to be had by it. He doesn't want you to be owned by it. He doesn't want you to be possessed by your own possessions. And to the same degree that our possessions become, listen to me, to the same degree that our possessions become a substitute for him, that is where our dependence is on, that is where our resource is, that is where our trust is, that is where our confidence is. To that same degree, we will become possessed by our possessions, and that is covetousness. And it's also idolatry. In the next message in this series, I'm going to walk through the parable of Luke 12, I promise, Scout's honor. That will not be until May 1st. I'm going to pause for a few weeks while we honor Palm Sunday and Easter, and then, of course, we have the live recording on the 24th. I think I said this before, but if you're a joyful noiser and not a singer, you can come. You just have to sit in the back. But it will be May. I'm just kidding. It will be May. It will be May before I return to this, and it'll be our next fellowship meal. But I'm going to go through that parable. And Haley said it earlier, don't delay in making your way downstairs. We're having communion with the fellowship meal, and we want to be able to observe that and get people eating. And so when we're done singing this last song, make your way downstairs. But let praise be your song. I did not know that they were going to sing that today. When I got in the car this morning, the Lord said, I want you to put on some music, and I want to spend some time with you on the way to church. And that was the song that came on. And I laughed because I knew what was in my message. And then we get here, and I laughed again when I saw that we were singing it. So let praise be your song. Amen?